this last couple of weeks has made me think, within the ICF competencies, we have this whole thing about being okay with not knowing. And that goes back to building trusted teams, being clear about their ecosystem, and how they can kind of almost delegate out that knowledge. There's something in that, I think. I used to think the similarity with leadership and coaching was all about, listening and asking questions. But I think it's that piece for me now. It's it's okay not to know.
Welcome to the Coaching Studio. I'm your host, Lyssa, deHart, and today I am excited to introduce my guest, Mary Anna Wright. Mary Anna is an MCC with the International Coaching Federation, and she is beyond that an accomplished leadership coach, communication specialist, and a coach educator with a career that spans influential roles both in Ireland and internationally. As the former president of the International Coaching Federation in Ireland and also as a global advisor for coaching, Mary Anna has been a significant participant in shaping the coaching profession. Her diverse background includes senior positions in the voluntary and public sectors. She has a PhD in cultural change, rave culture, we're going to get into that, and impactful work in public relations with a focus on behavioral change. Mary Anna's coaching expertise helps leaders step into their full potential, blending her deep knowledge of communications with innovative coaching techniques. She is also the host of the Coaching Presence podcast. I was on that. You should go listen to it. I'll have a link. And she has a community for Coaching Presence as well, where she shares her wisdom and the wisdom of other coaches with coaches worldwide. I'm excited to have her join us today to explore how she thinks about coaching, coaching leaders, and supporting people to explore their values and their goals. Mary Anna, I am so looking forward to this conversation with you today. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. I am curious. I really like to begin this conversation with a little bit about how either you found coaching or, as it conversely happens, how coaching maybe discovered you.
I think there was a two-pronged approach, really. One was fascinated by behaviour change, culture change. My PhD, I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, was years ago, about all of that stuff, change. And my background was really in using communications to promote change. So sort of environmental, sustainable behaviours, like encouraging people to cycle to work, encouraging people to recycle their rubbish, that kind of thing. But I'd met and married a man from Ireland, and I knew if I ever moved to this part of Donegal, I'm really remote, I would probably have to be self-employed. And this was 20 years ago, way before the pandemic and the kind of norm of being able to work from home. And I'd heard about coaching and what I'm calling an American model of coaching, where it was quite usual for people to coach over the phone at that time. So I thought that might work. Yeah. So I went to night classes, and I'm such a certificate junkie that I had to do a properly accredited training after that. So then I invested in an ICF accredited program, and that was the start of it, really. And then I got hooked.
Yeah. What led you into, had you already gotten your PhD at that point, or did that sort of emerge out of it?
No, I'd already got my PhD. So I did the PhD because I was a raver. and going back to this.
That was going to be my question to you. Like who chooses rave culture except for somebody who enjoys raving? And so, how did this evolve?
Rave culture had a huge impact on me and a whole generation, We'd gone from, so I grew up in England, gone from being, if you went out for a night out, you'd get hit on by men. It was all kind of drink culture and all of that. And suddenly you were just dancing, connecting with other people. And we really believed it was part of this huge new movement. And I was fascinated by it. And, I said to you, I'm a certificate junkie. I'm such a nerd. I can't just go to a party. I have to do a PhD about it.
That is a whole new level of
nerdiness
out on what you're doing.
Yeah. So I did a degree in marine biology, but really fascinated by environmental change, a master's in human ecology, which was how we relate to the environment. I did my thesis for that on rave culture. And then I thought there's something in this, and I turned that into a PhD. So that's how it all started. And I funded that with a lot of journalism, which was the kind of segue into a career in communications. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. And when you look back on that work that you did, how does it influence and impact the work that you're doing today?
I think it's all about connection. I really think it's all about connection. So it also impacts on the deep ecology work that I was studying when I did my master's. This is all about how we connect to self, to each other, and to our environment, to the world. I know that when I was thinking about some of the questions you might ask today, I know that sometimes you ask people about books they've read, but I'm going to jump and answer the question in case you don't ask it.
I'm going to ask it again later, but you jump in with it.
One really influential book that I read when I was about 18 was James Lovelock's Gaia Theory. It blew my mind. It's if we think in terms of coaching supervision, the systemic approach, the seven-eyed model. This is I7. We are part of we're all connected. We are part of a global being. And I think that actually this is why I'm fascinated by coaching presence, because I think it is almost a form of consciousness, really, when we really tune into people and really connect with people.
Yeah. So just for those who are listening or watching that don't know the seven-eyed model, it really comes out of Peter Hawkins' work around supervision. And so the seven-eyed model, can you talk a bit more about I7?
Not really.
Okay, well then never mind.
No, sorry, I was being facetious. The idea is that we have different lenses through which we look at our work, and I7 in this model is really the system within which we're operating, within which, as a supervisor, we're operating, as a coach, we're operating, and within which our clients and the organisation within which they work are operating. And what I liken it to is an ecosystem. So, you've heard of a marine biology background. Within, on the beach where I live in Ireland, there are tiny little ecosystems within the rock pool. In turn, they are affected by the tidal ecosystem that rolls in, rolls out. They are part of, we have tides coming up the west coast of Ireland that connects them to the rest of the world. It's tiny ecosystems connect to bigger ecosystems, connect to bigger ecosystems. That's how I interpret it. In my mind.
Yeah. The thing that is, as I was growing up, my mother was a Jungian psychologist. And so I'm thinking also of that idea of the collective unconscious, right? That sense of that interconnectedness of all of us. And in the way that I'm hearing you talk, the interconnectedness, not just of us between each other, but also within the environment, in the entire ecosystem in which we live, not just our home or our town or our place on the planet, but the entire planet, and that interconnectivity of all of us.
As coaches, we focus on the person in front of us, but they're not on their own. They're affected by so many other factors. And I think that's what that approach, that seven-eyed model approach, allows us to think about, what else is going on there.
Yeah, what else is going on there? And I think it really also speaks to the reason why supervision is so powerful for coaches, or honestly, as a therapist, I was getting supervision. I've been in some form of supervision probably since 1989. But it often was from the perspective of the seven-eyed model, really like I 1, 2, 3, maybe getting it, 4, maybe 5, but really it wasn't as globally encompassing as it has the potential to be. And I think it is such a beautiful way to begin to illuminate and explore our relationship, not just to the people that we work with, but to the work itself and to ourselves and to the world and the impact that we might bring as coaches to the world itself. I think it's powerful. It's really powerful.
Absolutely.
What was, as you think about, this coalescing of these different elements. I mean, marine biology, then you're moving into really exploring people and communication. Was there a moment? I mean, I heard the certificate junkie element of this, but I mean, what was the moment that was maybe that moment in time where you're like, I've now learned about this coaching. I actually want to make this something that I do, because there are other things you could have done, even though you were remote. I mean, there were other things you could have chosen, but you chose coaching. And what was behind that decision?
I think it's the transformation that both you can experience when you are coaching and in the client seat as well. I think it's that, I'm fascinated by, the cliche of the aha moment, but helping people make that self-awareness, that connection for themselves is really powerful. I love it. I think it's that. And, we try different options and then you think, oh, can I make it work? Can't I make it work? And, when I first moved here, I did do some little bits of communications consultancy and things like that. But actually, it's the need. The impact is so huge with coaching that it's pretty addictive. I think you can get in, you can get really, really deeply involved in it. And then I actually quite liked becoming a specialist. I'd always resisted that and thought, I'm a real generalist. I'm pretty good at a lot of, a breadth of things. That sounded a bit wrong, but you know what I mean? Like I was fairly good at things. I'm not particularly brilliant at writing, but I was fairly okay. But actually, the more you learn, the more you know you need to learn. The thing about coaching that I love as well. I think there is this journey towards mastery, but it's the classic that I think as soon as you start calling yourself a master coach, which is why I'm slightly uncomfortable with that approach, then you've kind of lost the purpose of it somehow. I think we are always refining, we're always learning.
Yeah, I think MCC is just the beginning of the next chapter of a very long, long, long book.
It's a milestone. Yeah.
That is all that it is. Yes. Yeah. It is just a little cairn of rocks on a roadside that says, 5 kilometers more. And then you get to the next one.
Yeah.
There'll be gas between the next 5 kilometers, so you'll be fine. And you keep going and you're driving along and you're continuing to evolve. Yeah. How has your own philosophy around coaching evolved through the years?
That's the classic question that gets asked when you're applying for coaching work, and I never really quite know how to answer it. Apart from probably the partnership piece, so it's, I noticed in the introduction there's talk about technique and stuff, and I think that really it's the realization that I'm wanting to say holding the space and bringing my presence is where my value is. It's kind of the shared space, the partnership, really. And I think that took a lot of learning. So I'm not quite sure whether that's a philosophy or not, but certainly it's a realization that actually the value in the coaching is that piece. It's being comfortable with not trying to do too much, but just trying to be in the space.
Well, it kind of harkens back to what you said earlier, which is that idea of the more you learn, the more you know you don't know, right? Yeah. Like the less you know, whatever that weird thing is that happens. And I think that piece of that evolution from that idea of I'm here to be of a support to you, to the evolution of it's really about the partnership and the energy exchange between us that I'm hearing. And what was, when you're thinking about that, because there's a letting go piece, at least there was for me. So I'll just speak for myself. For me, there was this real letting go piece of some sort of attachment I had to something, whatever the thing was. What was that movement into that presence and that being with and holding space that was your sort of challenge as you were evolving?
I think it was realizing that I didn't know. So when I say that, that sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's, when I was starting out, I was, oh, I can solve this. I can do this. Don't worry. This is easy. This is easy. I can help them work it out.
I got you.
Yeah. You can, and I hear that sharp intake of breath sometimes when I'm mentoring, the person, yes, boom, I can solve this. And it was getting rid of all of that. And it was I could almost imagine myself like a kind of radar. No, radar's the wrong word, but some sort of, like I've got a bat detector. And it's almost like I'm that, I try and get rid of so much that I can just tune into the little squeaks and the energy shifts and everything. I view myself
bat
as a
detector. Oh my gosh. You were cracking me up. But yeah, it's like sort of I can hear the little sonar squeaks.
Yeah, that's my job.
Whales,
just kind of try and tune my ego out enough and try and turn up the volume on them enough that I can pick up on the signals.
Yeah. How do we tune down our ego?
It's flipping hard. And that's what the journey to mastery is about, I think. I think it's that. And sometimes I can't do it, Sometimes I really can't do it because I still get a bit of a kick about going, I know. Sometimes it's that, and you get a bit hooked into that. So it's an ongoing journey. It's ongoing.
Yeah. How do you catch yourself when I assume your noticing of it is quicker than it was at the beginning. Now you're like, oh, there it is. There's the...
I don't always catch myself, but I am a bit more aware of certain things. If I hear a pattern, it's certain patterns that I think, oh, here we go. This is that pattern that I'm great at solving for them. It's that. I start to hear a pattern and then I think, no, what am I assuming here? I'm assuming that their stuff is the same stuff as the last client that had a similar, or I'm assuming, and that's it. No, it's their stuff, their ecosystem, their world. Don't make assumptions.
I love that. What am I assuming here when we find ourselves getting hooked into whatever that thing is for us? What am I assuming here? Wow, I think that is crucially important question that we're asking ourselves. What is my assumption here? Yeah, and I know you. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. You were about to say something.
But I think this is why supervision is important, because I think sometimes we lose the ability to do that ourselves. So that's why I value supervision, because I'm reminded of that question. What were you assuming?
Well, and I love that. I'm getting ready to start some supervision with somebody new who I've not worked with before, and I just had the conversation with them yesterday. And we're going to start with supervision. And I've been in supervision, like I said, for quite a while, and I've done coaching supervision. And I really like it, but I think I'm going to take that inquiry with me to even inform what I want to do work around. Like, what am I assuming now? Like, whatever that is that I've been assuming, that might be the place to get the supervision, regardless of what it is, where it shows up in my life, where it shows up in my work life, where it shows up in my work with my clients / the thinkers that I'm working with. I think you've given me a nugget I really want to hold on to. What am I assuming here? My husband's going to love hearing this, by the way, because this was our first major arguments in our marriage was around, you're making an assumption. And I'm like, yes, I am. I had to sort of learn how to throttle back on that. And I think that even ties back into your work around the relational connectedness of things, right? Like we learn
Absolutely.
Things in so many
communications. And communications, because I think we all make assumptions about the words people, what they mean. We make assumptions that people have the same feelings. If I may give an example of something that came up this week in my coaching around this, about assumptions. I've been working with a woman who's just had her first child, and she's in that position where she's probably outgrown her role, but her life's just, that madness with a newborn. And so she had a conversation at work, which was, look, I'm really bored with what I'm doing. And she said she used the word bored loads of times. I'm really bored. But right now, this is, I need to be in this situation. I can't, I don't want to change too much, but I'm really bored. And that was interpreted as, don't give her anything else to do. And what she meant was, I can't change job or get more, but I need something new and exciting because I'm really bored. But it was interpreted as, she's got enough on her plate, don't give her anything else. We need to unpack these assumptions.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's kind of like intent impact a bit also, right? Like the intention is to say, I'm really bored. I would like some more challenges, but I can't change positions. I can't take on I don't want to change it to a whole new position and deal with all the dynamics of a new team and new people. I want to stay where I'm at, but I want to still be challenged. And the impact being how other people hear us also and make an assumption. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think there's those classic coaching questions about, and when I say bored, I mean, I could do with something new and exciting to work on. It's like how to add that extra bit, the questions about, and when you say bored, what do you mean by bored?
Yeah, that's probably a great question to be asking people anyway. But if you're a manager or a leader in an organization and you have somebody who comes to you and says, I'm feeling bored, I don't want to take on a new position, but I'm feeling bored, it's a great place to get curious with them as well, versus having the automatic assumption that I can't give them anything else because I want to keep them. Yeah. And I don't want to overwhelm them with anything, but boredom is just very different than I'm overwhelmed. Like it doesn't equal the same thing, but it can be assumed that way. Yeah. Hi, Lyssa here. I want to interrupt real quick and just say thank you for being a viewer on this channel. I very much appreciate you being here. And I'd also like to make an invitation to you. I love to meet people and have more one-to-one interactions with them. And to that end, I have a monthly coaching Q&A. We cover all kinds of topics, coaching related. And I would love to invite you, my treat, to that those monthly coaching sessions. You can find a link below, and I want to just say thank you, and I look forward to meeting you on a monthly Q&A soon. Cheers. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming. What is it that you're thinking about? I mean, you're working with a lot of executives and leaders, and what are you thinking about? Like, what are you noticing are the sort of things that are showing up for the people that you work with that you're noticing maybe that are different since, I don't know if since the pandemic makes sense, but just in the last few years, we have so many radical changes happening in the world.
I think there is it does feel like there's a general drop in resilience in the world. Knock-on effect.
Say that one more time. A
general sort of drop in resilience in the world. I think people are feeling resilience. Yeah, I thought that was over. I was thinking, I really noticed that during the pandemic and afterwards. I think we're still not quite there. I think the world is quite a scary place for a lot of people at the moment. There's massive industries really cutting back on people. People are feeling concerned about. We were talking about AI earlier. There is a concern about that kind of thing. We just look at the newspapers, and some of the news stories are very concerning. I talked about the environment, climate. I think there is a feeling that people are a general anxiety there in the world. That's something that I'm picking up on.
Yeah, and I think that resiliency, that a capacity to be okay with the volatility of the things happening around us. And to our point, like earlier, before we even started talking on the the podcast, I mean, the use of AI and how that's transforming industries and jobs. And there are jobs that are going to no longer be there anymore. And frankly, how do you see that maybe even impacting coaches and coaching, since AI is getting better at just asking the simple question?
Yeah. And I was on a call thinking about this just a couple of days ago, and I heard an AI coach do a very, very good job of coaching. I think we still need the human connection. My concern is that there's going to be this huge price variance between, certain elite people will be able to afford and invest in actual coaching, and then we will probably do volume coaching using AI. I guess, as we both know, AI is only as good as the intelligence that's behind it, the human factor behind it anyway. But yeah, there's something else that I was picking up on actually this last couple of weeks. It made me think, within the ICF competencies, we have this whole thing about being okay with not knowing. And I think that's something that leaders are needing to know more and more these days, because they don't know. And they can be comforted by information. And yet things are changing so much that they really are needing to be comfortable with not knowing. And that goes back to building trusted teams, being clear about their ecosystem, and how they can kind of almost delegate out that knowledge. But there's something in that, I think. I used to think the similarity with leadership and coaching was all about, listening and asking questions. But I think it's that piece for me now. It's it's okay not to know.
Yeah. Well, and it takes a level of courage, at least as I'm listening to you, to be able to sit in that space of not knowing, because it is so uncomfortable. And that kind of circling back to the idea of there's a reduced resiliency. How do we, coaches, human beings, support all of us to be able to sit in that discomfort of the not knowing, given our reduced resiliency?
I think that comes back to connection, actually. And it's almost sacred space that we create in a coaching conversation. It's that we are a trusted thinking partner. And that's where our value is. And it's rare. We're not in competition with the people we're working with. We are there to have their back, to challenge them, to help them think through different perspectives and all of that stuff. That's, I think, where our value is.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think it really also, kind of circling back to the AI issue, I think that human connection, I'm not saying that an AI couldn't do a good job of holding a coaching conversation. I think an AI probably is going to be great at doing that. And yet there isn't ever going to be an AI who's had that lived experience that maybe you're talking about, that can empathize with you and have that energetic exchange that is sometimes that's held in the silence between two human beings.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think is a common misconception about coaching that might be important for maybe that coaches have? You do coach education. What is a common misconception that you see about what coaching is?
When I'm talking about coach education, by the way, I'm very much a mentor and a supervisor rather than a trainer. Right. I don't work through a training school, but I think it probably is for coaches. It's where the value is. That's the misinformation. I think coaches think that their value is helping people fix stuff, and I think it's much deeper than that. And I still think there's a perception that as coaches we tell people what to do. I think most new clients that I have will say, I can't wait to hear, I'm really looking forward to working with you. This is the stuff that I want, some advice on. So it's that piece, I think. I guess it's hard to measure that value. It sounds so kind of ethereal that this is, we hold space, I bring my presence, all of that stuff. It sounds, a bit crazy until you've experienced that value. Yeah,
it is. I think, there's this piece of performance that gets really activated in probably all of us. I think it maybe is tied to that ego piece also. Like, I want to be of use. I'm smart enough. I'm good enough. And gosh darn it, people love what I have to say. And so there's maybe a little bit of that gets all tied in there also. And yet, what does it mean to hold space for a thinker to think? And I think you just said something else that is so really crucial. I don't have a dog in the race of whatever. I'm not their competitor. I'm not listening for like the no, we can't do that. I'm listening for what's possible, which is a very different way of listening. And you're really an expert in communication. How does that change everything in a conversation when I'm not listening to go, well, Mary Anna, I hear you saying that, but I don't know how comfortable I feel with us moving to the far reaches of Ireland, where we'll be sort of isolated. Like a spouse would have like maybe a different sort of response to it. Like, sure, we can entertain the conversation, but I don't think so, right? So there's like an investment in the choice that a person is making, whereas in a coaching conversation or the goal in a helping conversation of this sort is, as a thought partner, we're not going to be, the outcome doesn't impact us. So we have an opportunity to be in a different relationship to it. I don't know. I'm kind of feel a little bit like I'm circling here, but I want to just throw this back to you, just sort of like, ooh, here you go, hot potato.
What I'm picking up from that, though, is this feeling that we believe in our clients. And I think that's really fundamentally that we couldn't work with someone that we didn't have high regard for and really want the best for. And so we are really keen to help them think it through and help them think whether moving to the far reaches of Ireland is going to be the best thing and help them through all the options and stuff like that. So I think that's, the complete and whole tenet of coaching is that we really have to genuinely believe that. And that's the assumption. We have to assume that our clients know what's best for them. And we help them unpack that a bit.
Right. So there's the tension also between the assumption of knowing what somebody means and the assumption of wanting the best for them and assuming that they know. And that inside of them, while they may not know the answer, they know their experience and only they can speak to that. And then from there, maybe the awareness and insight emerges.
Yeah. I also think that sometimes people come with the big stuff, they want to find their North Star in their career or that kind of big stuff. And actually, so I'm laughing because I'm hearing the stuff come up in what I'm saying, but it's actually probably helping them understand that it's okay not to know, that there might not be a North Star for their career. What would that look like? So the other option, is, yes, we can go down the coaching, right? I'm going to help them. I'm going to give them a checklist and a values exercise and all of this stuff and help them find the North Star. And then, okay, well, what other ways of finding your career are there? I think it's that stuff. What's going to guide you if it's not that obvious?
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny too. And I don't know, I'm guessing, I'm making an assumption. I'll just call it what it is. That you've probably had conversations with people where they come because they feel like they need to find their North Star because everybody else has said you need to find your North Star. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's not really a North Star that they are looking for. They are fine with their career the way that it is. They're fine with the work that they're doing, but there's a different purpose or value that's meaningful to them that has nothing to do with their job. Their job just allows them to have the capacity to do this other thing that they absolutely are fed by, like they get resourced by. I mean, that's the assumption, right, that I'm making. What is your experience? Like, do you see that?
I think actually what it is about is if they can make sense of their own story, then they feel much better about things. Mm-hmm. And, I used to think I've gone from marine biology to human ecology to rave culture to PR and this and journalism, and then suddenly I'm a coach. And I've told that story so many times that it's starting to make sense to me. And I think that's processing, isn't it? That's and every story has, a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a challenge. My challenge was, how do I get to make a living in rural Ireland? And now I'm kind of feel like I'm just about to embrace being on the kind of hero side of that. It's all starting to make sense. But I think it's helping people make sense of their own stories, perhaps, is one of our roles by listening and replaying it. Yeah. And helping them sort of spot what if things seem so disparate, well, what patterns do you notice? What themes are there? What might they spot for themselves? How are their values expressed through this?
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think a big thing for me was really, like, as I look at my own career, sort of like you, I mean, I didn't have a I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I'm a little like right now, like, oh my God.
You, it's less dolphins and more counting kind of, winkles on the beach type of things. Having said that, my best friend is the CEO of Whale and Dolphin Charity, so there are exceptions, but for the majority,
there are dolphins. I actually was fascinated by there are dolphins. I was actually fascinated by sharks, but this is going quite far afield. I had, when I was a kid, worked as a volunteer with the deHart Aquarium in San Francisco. It's no longer called that; it's been changed as they upgraded it or whatever. But I was there in the 70s when they caught a great white shark off the coast of California, and they brought it into, they have a huge roundabout, like, I mean, huge. And they put this very small great white shark. I mean, it was only like about, 10 feet to 13 feet long. It was a tiny one. And they put it into the roundabout, and they didn't keep it there for long because it wasn't doing well. But it was one of those monumental moments in my life of working as a volunteer as a kid in this aquarium and thinking, I want to do marine biology. Like, this is, I want to go out and count sharks and do all this sort of stuff. So that was sort of the dream when I was 10, 11, 12, that or be a veterinarian, neither of which have manifested. I will be.
But, I think this goes back to, we are starting to think about our career when we are 7, 8, and we have the pressure on. My daughter's 14. I'm constantly thinking, what's she going to do for her leaving certificate? What's she going to do at university? She's 14. How does she know? But I think we have that. I'm mid-50s now, and I'm still, what am I going to be when I grow up? It's kind of
the never-ending quest.
Yes. So I'm now realizing I'm just going to make sense of my story.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think, though, that these things, like for me, like as you're talking, this idea of making meaning and making sense of my story, those things are still a part of me, even though that wasn't ending up being what it was my career, right? Those interests didn't go away. They informed how I thought about the world. And I think, like, in a coaching relationship or even in a therapeutic relationship, the capacity to really be in partnership with the person, the thinker that you're working with, if I'm the thinker in the conversation, I get to bring back these things that they created energy. I was excited. I was passionate. I was explosive with this idea as a kid. It didn't manifest. We moved away from California. I didn't get to, I ended up in the desert. I had to readjust. I found other things, that my life wasn't over. I went in a different direction. But But it is that also that energy that comes up when we get really excited about things as a kid, and not to squash that. And I think sometimes that's the thing that breaks our resilience also, or who are the people that are around us and what do they do to our dreams? It doesn't, just because we have a dream doesn't mean we're going to act on it. It doesn't mean I'm really going to, throw away my life and go run off to Tahiti and, paint women on a beach. It can just be that it's the thing that brings me energy, and I can find ways to incorporate it in my life in ways that are meaningful. Maybe that meaningful way is, I don't know, volunteering or donating or whatever to causes that are important to me. But that sense of finding those places of passion where the energy really brings into us. And I think about your client, who is bored at work. I mean, how many people have had that experience? I know I did. I started taking cake decorating at one point for the love of Pete, because I was like, I love what I do, but I'm bored. And so maybe
I'm stuck here for different practical reasons as well.
Different practical reasons. Yeah. And I didn't have a brand new baby that I was juggling, but I had other stuff going on. And to your point, like, the boredom wasn't because I didn't love my job or because I wanted to change careers. But it was definitely, I needed something. There was something that boredom was telling me I needed more of. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think actually that's probably how I stepped into coaching as well, because I was always, what else can I learn? I know I'll go to coaching night classes. And that led to the course. And then it was actually, this might work for me. So it was the kind of spark, the learning spark, and then the practical reality of actually this could work. And I love it. And I'm prepared to invest. I'm prepared to invest emotionally and financially and, throw my all in here.
Yeah. And it's funny too. I was watching something on, I don't know, YouTube. It doesn't matter. And there was sort of this sort of idea that coaching is, this sort of multi-level marketing, thing. And I thought, I didn't respond on YouTube, but I guess I will now, since I'm going to say this. But I really think it's like anything. I mean, I went to college to get an art, and I ended up with an art degree and a minor in anthropology. So it was college and multi-level marketing program, because I went to get educated to discover whether or not there was what I was going to do. And if you decide to go into business or philosophy or accounting or whatever you choose to go do, science, become a marine biologist, whatever. I mean, it's coaching is, I see, very much aligned with the same sort of learning model as every other learning model. I mean, what you do with it might be different, but I think it's just that spark of curiosity about something, right?
Absolutely. I thought you were going down a different line with what you were saying. I thought you were going to be talking about some of the people that are calling themselves coaches, but I would probably call them influencers.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a difference then between what is a thought partnership, and what is the difference in your mind between a thought partnership and an influencer who calls themselves a coach?
I think they're better looking, frankly.
They have a better photographer for sure.
They have a much better photographer. They've got a backdrop of kind of Bali and all of that stuff, and I think there's the lifestyle that one would aspire to, and I can assure you, probably even just looking around this, you can see that that's one of the mismatches. I think that coaching is one of those words that has started to mean that, influencer. I can tell you how to have the life that I have. It's not what I think of coaching. I think previously I was saying that there was a kind of a concept that coaching was consulting. I will offer advice. I think that's how that's emerging now, in that kind of influencer realm. You can have this lifestyle. You can look this good in a bikini if just you eat what I'm being paid to promote kind of coaching. I think it's a very different world. And I think but it's why things like the credentials that we pursue and things like that help us kind of show actually we're professional. We've reached a standard. Yeah, we've got the milestone on the road. I think it's a different thing, but I think that's possibly how the coach consultant thing is now materializing. It's more those kind of people on. That sounded really those kind of people disparaging, but beautiful people in Bali.
Well,
promoting a lifestyle.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is true, and I've heard this not just from influencers, but I think there is a sort of idea out there: if you do what I'm doing, then you'll have what I have. Do what I'm telling you to do, so that you can have what I have. And I think for me, there's a level of disingenuousness to this message. I remember hearing it for the first time from somebody who was going through a program for sobriety. If you do what I do, then you'll get what I got, which is sober in this particular case. But there was this sort of idea that comes out of that message for me, and I'd be curious how it lands on you. But for me, is this idea of, you don't know me. You don't know whether I'm capable of even doing what you do. You don't know, in this particular case of looking better in a bikini. You don't know whether I can sell that bikini or not. I'm pretty sure I can't if I'm in competition with somebody who's like a supermodel. I can't do that. That isn't my interest. And the assumption of, if you just put out really pretty pictures, if you put out really pretty messages, if you've got little memes that you're creating all the time that are uplifting, and if people just do that, then they're going to have the same sort of life that I have, whatever that is. And I think it creates a level of mediocrity, in the sense of we lose that sense of who I innately am as a human being is no longer relevant or valued. Now I must be like you in order to get what you got. What's showing up for you is we're chatting about this?
I think it's rather sad. It's sad that we've got, I was saying my daughter's a teenager, and, there's a whole generation of girls aspiring to look in a certain way. It's not that that's not new, but I think it's more penetrate. That concept's penetrated wider because people can't escape from it because it's on their phones all the time. I think it's sad, and I think there are assumptions, and I think it disconnects, and I think it speaks to all the things that the coaching that you and I believe is coaching tries to address, connection. It's very appealing to a teenager to be just do this and you fit in.
Yeah.
Just do this and you fit in. You can be like me and you'll be part of,
the popular in-group.
Yeah, you'll be popular. It's sad. It really is.
So much external motivation at that point also. And the downside, at least in the work that I've done with people, has been that external motivation, judging our insides by other people's outsides, means that we're out of touch with what their insides are actually quivering about and struggling with and anxious about, and all of that. We don't see it because we only see the pretty exterior. But the other piece of it is, God, what a loss of power if all of my self-worth is dependent on what you think of me.
Yeah. And I don't know how you help people see that. I use the word help there because I realise that actually people only see it for themselves. Because no matter how much you say, this to other people, it is one of those, they have to have their own aha moment about it.
Yeah, and it usually is painful.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think it's not new. I think this is common for.
But it's more pervasive and probably more damaging.
Far more pervasive.
Yeah.
And as a result.
Some of the things that we're seeing now involve, surgery to look in a certain way. And, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So is there something that, Is there something that as we've been talking, or maybe as you're thinking about it, that you've seen, especially for coaches, and people in this sort of helping coaching in the way that we're thinking about thought partnership way, that supports people to maybe have a realistic expectation of what it takes to build a coaching practice, what it means to become an executive coach or a leadership coach the way you've done?
I think people need to, question some of there's a whole load of marketing kind of, join my 2-week program and learn to be $1 million coach in, whatever stuff going around. And I think there's, it's about developing yourself as a coach. I think fundamentally, if you coach well and you are a really good thinking partner who've done all the work to help you tune out your ego and tune up the bat detector stuff.
I know.
that takes a lot of practice, and it's taken me, I told you I started training 20 years ago, and it's only really now that I'm making a decent living coaching. It's kind of partly that was just me being a bit rubbish about running a business, but but part of that is that I'm a certificate junkie, so I'm never good enough. I have to do more training, I have to do this, I'm not ready, I need to, there's that bit. So I would probably speak to that. I don't really believe that you are enough right now, get out and coach thing. I think people do need a good solid coach training.
There's like a balance though.
Yeah, I think we do need the basics of a coach training to understand what coaching is and coaching isn't. And then I think it's, we need to practice, and learn your trade,
Yeah.
I'd love to say there's a shortcut, but I don't think there is. I think it's...
Well, I don't think there's a shortcut to any long-term business strategy, honestly. My husband's always saying, right, fast, or cheap. And so you can... Oops, are you okay?
I'm fine. I just had my light fall over.
I wonder, right here at that moment, right, fast or cheap, right? And so it's like this idea of like business is just, I think, having a realistic expectation that it takes time and that there's a balance. You can't wait forever, right?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you need enough in order to be able to confidently...
But that's why these milestones are useful.
Yeah.
Actually, there is an international standard, and when you get to that standard, you are a good coach. You are coaching. You do your level of training. You are coaching. You clock up some hours. You've reached an international standard. This is actually, this is good standard of coaching. You keep going. So they are useful in that. They're there for us, and they've, I'm now on the credentials and standards board for the ICF. There is so much work going into those standards, and we aren't the only professional body. There are others as well, also really trying to make sure that there is a standard and a decent code of ethics and all of those things around the practice in the world. But I think it's learning, refining, reflecting. It's all of that piece. It's embodying a coaching mindset, actually. Starting to, not make assumptions, to notice, to do all of the things that we talk to our clients about for ourselves.
Yeah. And that's, that probably is the summary of everything, right? All the things that you'd be interested in asking your client, how do they impact you yourself, and what is the work you're doing around it?
Absolutely. And that classic, what assumptions are we making here kind of question.
Yeah, and I'm taking that one away completely to my next supervision session. What assumptions have I been making that I'm coming in to explore? Who's a person, or maybe there's a book, I know you mentioned something earlier, but that has been really impactful in your professional development, beyond your own book, on rave culture?
That's a hard one, isn't it? Because there are so many, and I think they change with time. I think Coactive Coaching was a really impactful book when I first read it. I think I'm rereading. I've had a whole load of new looks at ecology books recently, actually, which has got me thinking again. Fascinating stuff. Last Christmas, my husband gave me a whole stack of books on marine biology books, new ways of looking at things like shells. And, shells is a theory that actually they are laying down memories. It's if you actually look at it in that sense, like fascinating. That's got me thinking. Yeah, it's got me thinking again about things. It's helped me relook at something that I studied in my teenage years. Yeah. So that's not a very good answer to the question. But
it's a great answer to the question. Sometimes it's revisiting things that are meaningful to you. And I think that
it's a kind of spiral though, isn't it? It's not, you're not circling back, you're coming back around from a different perspective.
Exactly.
And that's yeah.
You're not looking at it through the same lens that you looked at it 30 years ago or 20 years ago, or in my case, 40 years ago. Maybe not 40, but yeah, you're looking at it in new ways, and it gives you that opportunity to see it through a new lens and to re-explore it. And also because it was something we were excited about at one point, it sparks new ways of looking at the world around us. And I love that. That's great. Yeah. I'm starting this practice of asking, you won't know who the next guest is, so, but asking you, what is a question that you would ask the next person on the coaching studio?
I guess the question is, what do you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
Beautiful. Excellent. Well, I'll be incorporating that. Mary Anna, thank you so much for being on the show today. I have absolutely enjoyed having this conversation with you today.
I've really enjoyed it as well, so thank you for the invitation.